Hi team! This week we're celebrating the 1 year anniversary birthday of my portrait gown created after the Annabelle Carracci painting, sometimes entitled Woman Holding a Clock, and since that's one of the nicer titles, that's the one we're going to go with. I started with a pair of drawers. I used Patterns of Fashion, whichever one had the drawers in it. I believe it was the underpinnings and linens or something, not the most recent one, maybe one right before that. I made sort of a Renaissance crop top using some linen scraps that will eventually one day become a full-length linen shirt, but I really didn't want to make a whole new shirt at the time. Next up was my petticoat, which was originally white, and then I dyed it red for this project specifically, and also added a couple more rows of cording. It wasn't fully starched at the time of this dressing video back in 2020, but I have since then acquired the appropriate amounts of starch to hold the skirts out if I do get to go out and wear it later. After that, I tossed on a petticoat. This petticoat is a blue, probably home decor weight damask. It's surprisingly light, and the fabric's actually been in the washer a number of times. It started as an Elizabethan, English-style, late 16th century gown. Then I cut that down to make a similar gown for my eldest child. And then I pieced it back up using the scraps I had and the original length of fabric to make this petticoat specifically for this gown. It is boned, which is not inconceivable for the late 16th century. The eventual gown is made off of, I believe, the Florentine style as determined by the Margot Anderson patterns that I used during the process of making this. So it is fully boned in the front and I believe along the lacing straps. I love how the straps on the petticoat came out, but I am not in love with the fact that they don't completely meet the back. That said, it's very comfortable. It falls just at the edge of my shoulders, which is something I haven't been able to achieve before. It could have been a little wider, I think, in the skirts, but again, I was working with scrap fabrics and piecing things back together to make a full, essentially, gown for myself. Next came the pocket, and this is, again, made out of remnants and things I just had laying around the house. Back to the petticoat for just a second. I do like to use a lot of extra lacing, which I have a lot of ribbons and lace and trim-like items in the house, so I'm not really worried about wasting the lacing, but I will cut off a 3 to 5 yard piece and just use that so that I'll be able to lace myself up into my own gowns, because if I can't get dressed on my own, I will probably not be dressed. So I have to keep that in mind, and that's why these laces are so long. And then at the end, I just kind of tie them along the back and either tuck them in or pin them up wherever they fit best. So after the petticoat and pocket comes it's similar to an English partlet, which I'm more familiar with. I used the Tudor Tailor and Margot Anderson patterns to come up with a kind of a one-piece neckcloth with ties, I guess. I'm not really sure what they're called. I really should do some research into the pieces that make up these Italian peninsula fashions, but for my purposes, it is the neck covering. It's made from silk organza or silk organdy. Organdy, organza? There's another one. Gauze, maybe? It's silk something. It's very sheer. And you can see a full vendor list for all of the items that I purchased for this project over on the blog, greenlinenshirt.com or sci-fi-cheergirl.com. So, I did start this dressing video kind of ahead of this by putting on just a minimal amount of makeup to kind of matte my face. there is lipstick involved, but it's that no makeup look. The earrings again came on first, and then the head wrap is just to keep my very questionable length hair down while I'm getting dressed. I don't want, anything pulling on my very well pinned buns and things on my head. So next up is the gown itself. It can sit in a chair. That's how that's how stiff that front is. I definitely used some modern materials for this one. In the bodice of the gown itself, I started with a couple of layers of, I believe, like a velveteen. There might be a wool in there. I know there's linen somewhere. It has a cotton lining, but the main the main buildy part in there is a heavy-duty fusible interfacing. Interfacing? Yes, interfacing. And that makes up the inside of the front piece, and that is why it is so smooth. There is actually a ridge in the piece because not in the interfacing, but there's a ridge in the gown itself because the original, I want to say interlining, flatlining, one of the two, I pieced it together because originally this was supposed to be just the mock-up for the final gown. But at some point I decided, you know what, I'm just going to make it and it'll be fine and I'll know how to make it again. So one of the masterpieces of my lifetime, of my portfolio, if you will, is essentially a mock-up. I used polyester faux silk taffeta for this. It's absolutely beautiful. It reminds me of an ink spill, I guess. In the right light, it's pretty cool. I love the sound that it makes, which you can't hear, sorry. I love the sound that it makes as it's, being rustled. It does have a train. I never had a gown with a train before this other than my wedding gown. Actually, I don't know if my wedding gown had a train. I'll have to go back and look at that. Anyway, so yeah, this was my mock-up. Again, lots of lacing. I cut a few yards of very small, I want to say maybe 1/8 inch ribbon, which I may have even had it in the house. It might have been a stash item. And I just laced that through so that I'd be able to lace myself up on both sides. When I'm being smart, I lace one side and then lace one side fully and then grab the other one, and I only have to do that one side up, but either way, it's adjustable, so yay for side lacing. The sleeves on this gown are not completely attached to the gown. Again, I come from the Renaissance fair way of creating things, and setting sleeves in a Rennie gown does not appeal to me at all. So I set the top. I went ahead and whip stitched the top of the sleeves in, and then the bottom of the sleeves are open. Now this actually works out really well to avoid stains, and also it's a little more breathable. I get a little air in there. Again, this is a polyester gown, so I want to make sure that I'm getting as much air as possible. So the gown is on, and then I have added a little pin placket, I guess. Now this isn't in the original portrait, obviously, but I did not want to stick thick brass pins into the front of this very fancy, for all intents and purposes, silk taffeta gown. So I made a little placket that I can just kind of pin to the trim there. And then I add my coral necklace, made up of different pieces that I found on eBay. There are small seed beads, and then there are also kind of larger tubular beads. I'm not great with jewelry, so I'm not entirely sure what it's called, but they're kind of bugle beads. That sounds like a thing. We'll call them bugle beads. So that all comes together, and then you get the final look. Now, I am also wearing my Oxblood American Duchess Stratford shoes. They are my absolute favorite shoe from American Duchess forever. Anyway, you get some portraits, and I did all of these Since we were quarantined at the time, I did all of these in my living room with a ring light and a backdrop and a mirror. I did have that mirror that I put up. I believe I was watching Riverdale. I was watching Riverdale at the time. The audio that you can't hear is the episode where I think Reggie confronts his dad about abuse or something. Oh, it's crazy. Anyway, so watching Riverdale, singing along, and getting dressed at like 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a magical experience, and I hope you like what you see. Thanks for hanging out.